Richards B. French. I am not a true Cape Codder. I was conceived on Cape Cod, so I guess that really makes me a true Cape Codder. But my mother decided that she would go to Brookline and have me, because that's where her closest relatives were. And then she brought me back after 2 weeks, and here I've been ever since. Open space. I grew up on a farm up in Comaquid. we grew cows, had cows, then grew corn. In the open space, being able to go out and, pretty much, go anywhere you'd like, where there were no houses, just a simpler way of life, I guess you might call it. All right.
How did you get from Comaquid to Hyannis?
I ended up growing up on a farm in Comaquid, and from there I graduated high school, Barnstable High School, and right after that I ended up going into the service for 4.5 years, came back and started to work for Cape and Vineyard. And Cape and Vineyard, I progressed to a management position and became the assistant manager in Hyannis, and Hyannis meaning downtown Hyannis, which is where Cape and Vineyard had their office next to Puritan Clothing. From there, I've always had a fondness for Hyannis, for the area, and I was involved in formulating the Hyannis Area Chamber of Commerce. And so, I've always wanted to stay involved in things that would make Hyannis a place that you could have kids grow up and have meaningful jobs. At one point, I was part of the Economic Development Commission for the town. And that oversaw the Independence Park, which today is obviously a place that's far changed from what Mr. LaRusso had in mind. But again, it has thriving businesses, and it's becoming more of a medical area. It's expanded out that way. So that's one of the areas that I'm very, very happy with. Sandy Neck.
Why is that?
Harkens back to just raw nature. It's just a gorgeous place, and it's just beautiful out there. In all seasons. I prefer to go out there in the wintertime. I think that's the best season out there. Summertime, yeah, people love the beach and the water and all that, but in the wintertime, it's where I think it really shines. Oh yeah, shellfishing, quahogging, little necks, yeah, oysters, but soft shells, it's like, oh, those are the best. You can't beat Barnstable clams, I think keeping young professionals, finding something that will take and keep them here. My biggest concern is that we don't become a service economy and force young homeowners and folks that want to have a meaningful job across the bridge. I just don't like to see it where it's kind of like Nantucket, where you can't afford to buy anything. And I think that's sad. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that Hyannis, Barnstable faces, is retaining the brain trust that we have. Yeah, as a matter of fact, our daughter and her husband are here, and they live in Centerville. Our son is in Florida, and he'd love to come back, but there's nothing that he can do here based on his skill set. So he's down there in Florida. But yeah, and I obviously the town of Barnstable has to take and encourage young people to stay here, and that's I think the town has done a great job at that through their growth management department, recreational department. I mean, I look at the stuff that the town has got with the brand new recreation center, all the facilities that they offer for kids in the summertime, the summer camps that the town puts on. I think it's fabulous, and it helps keep young families here because it gives them a place to have their children go that is safe and secure when both parents are working. Fiscal management. Fiscal management is by far and away the best in the Southeast. I mean, we've got a AAA bond rating. You've got a guy like Mark Milne, who is just a fabulous caretaker of the town's finances. I mean, he's great. He's the best. Yeah, I go back to my days and my dad, where we were farmers. And at the time, the building boom was just going. And it made it very lucrative to develop the property, all right? My father was so against it because the downside of putting it into conservation and then having to take it back out were onerous. And I think that if the town can take and keep farmers here, all right, open space, I think that's one of the premier things that we need to focus on. When you fly over Cape Cod, especially Barnstable, you look at it. It's all woods, and I'd like to see it stay that way. The kicker is that you put a lot of this stuff in conservation and conservation trusts, and it takes it out of the tax-paying base. And so the more you take out of the tax-paying base, it has to go to somebody. And again, it gets back to the kids and can they afford to live here? That's a big challenge. I worked at the Cumberland Golf Course when it was a 9-hole course. Frank Ryder, who was the president of the First National Bank of Yarmouth, was the head of the Greens Committee, and Darrell Shepard was one of the golf pros there. Bill Watola were on the Greens Committee, but it was a 9-hole golf course. And when I worked there, we decided that Bill Edlund was the gentleman I worked for, with Ricky Koval at the time. And we ended up, the golf course committee decided that they needed to have an 18-hole golf course. So Marston's Lane stopped right where Kelly Farm is today, where Mrs. Kelly had her farm. And it was just a dirt road. And what they ended up doing was making an 18-hole golf course out of Cumberland. And Ed Kroll was the contractor, Eddie Kroll, and he had a big D8 Caterpillar, and he got stuck in the mud Oh boy, didn't he get stuck in the mud down what is now the 7th hole, I believe, along Marston's Lane. Of course, all of that was nothing. It was a dirt road and woods. And that was my first job, helping build that and raking out the 7th fairway. We raked it all out by hand. 1961. It was great. You know, we came from we were the first class to go through the new high school on West Main Street. And Briar Connor was the principal. He was a little guy. And I tell you, he put on, for all the 9th grade boys, he said, and he laid out the rules and regulations and all. And he says, and guys, if you want to see what tough is, I'm going to show you what tough is. And he would sit on the gym floor, and they had ropes that would come down from the ceiling. And he'd sit down, and he'd say, now I'm going to show you what tough is. And he'd sit down, and then he'd pull himself up the rope. I'm going, all the kids would go, whoa, pretty good, And they didn't mess around with Mr. Connor, all right? You'd be talking in the hall, and he'd come up behind you, and he'd grab you behind the arm, and he said, Mr. French, no talking in the corridors. Where's your next class? Okay. It was where everybody, it was fairly small, but it was where, you wouldn't mess around because Mr. Connor knew your folks. So, yeah, those are the things. It was very regimented, and it was still fun. You learned a lot, but things have changed today, Wouldn't get away with that today. My name is Richards B. French.